After 20 years of marriage, my husband demanded that I sell our $10 million business to pay for his share in the divorce. But when he found out the company wasn't in my name, he was completely shocked. Before the story begins, if you like our channel, subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers. And now we invite you to enjoy a story with an unexpected ending. From the outside, anyone would have said I had the perfect life. Married to a charismatic man, living in a beautiful home, running a pachi, multi-million-dollar business. But behind the appearances, the reality was far from perfect. I met Daniel when I was 24. I was ambitious, determined, and dreamed of building something big. He was charming, full of confidence, and always said he wanted a life partner, someone to grow with. When we started dating, I felt special. He made me laugh, showered me with compliments, and promised me an amazing future. We got married after a year together, and I was sure I had found the love of my life. Starting a business together was his idea. At the time, I was working for a marketing firm and already had some knowledge of the industry. He, on the other hand, had a natural talent for networking and selling ideas. "With your skills and my vision, we can build something huge," he used to say, and I believed him. We worked long hours, waking up early and going to bed late. But over time, I started to notice a pattern. While I handled everything, from customer service to accounting, Daniel enjoyed the glorious side of the business. He attended investor meetings, showed up at events as the face of the company, while I stayed behind the scenes, making sure everything ran smoothly. At first, it didn't bother me much. I told myself we were a team and that we each had our role to play. But as the business grew, so did his ego. The first red flags. As the company became more successful, we started making more money. We bought a bigger house, upgraded our cars, and dined at expensive restaurants. But the more comfortable our life became, the more distant Daniel grew. He started traveling more often, always claiming it was for business. At first, I believed him. But then, I realized his trips were always to luxurious destinations and lasted longer than necessary. One day, while sorting through company paperwork, I came across a hotel invoice from Miami, where he had supposedly gone for an important meeting. But one detail stood out. The booking was for a couple. My heart sank. I wanted to convince myself it was a mistake, but deep down, I already knew the truth. When I confronted him, he laughed. He actually laughed. "You're overreacting, babe. You're imagining things." That broke me. Not just the possibility of him cheating, but the way he made me feel crazy for even questioning it. And me? I swallowed my pride. I chose to move forward. I had a business to run, employees who depended on me, a household to manage. I kept telling myself that things would get better with time. But then, I realized something. I was married to a man who never truly saw my worth. His friends only saw me as Daniel's wife, never as the woman who had built that empire alongside him. At dinners, he talked as if he had done everything on his own. I would sit there, a lump forming in my throat, but I smiled and stayed quiet. After all, marriage was about partnership, right? I didn't want to create unnecessary conflict, but fate had other plans for me, because after 20 years of marriage, Daniel made a decision that would change everything. And this time, I wouldn't stay silent. I always knew that building a business from the ground up required effort, but I never imagined that all the effort would come from just one side, mine. From day one, I was the one carrying the company on my back. I spent sleepless nights drafting business plans, handling clients, and solving last-minute problems. When we faced financial struggles in the beginning, I was the one who gave up comfort so we could invest more in growing the business. Daniel? He loved to say we were a team, but his definition of partnership was quite convenient. He showed up when it suited him, spoke like a visionary leader in meetings, but was nowhere to be found when I had to deal with crises. I remember one particular night, a moment that stayed with me. Our business was still in its early stages, and a major client was about to sign a contract with us. But the night before the meeting, Daniel simply, disappeared. I called, texted, Nothing. The meeting came, and I went alone. I convinced the client, presented the numbers, and promised we would deliver the best service. In the end, we got the contract. And when I came home exhausted, I finally found Daniel. He was lounging on the couch, a whiskey glass in hand. "Oh, babe, sorry, I got caught up with some friends after the gym. But hey, how did the meeting go?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw in his face how hard I had worked to secure that contract while he was out having fun. But instead, I just smiled, swallowed my anger, and said, "We got the deal." And he responded the way he always did. "Knew you'd handle it." That's how it always was. But I didn't see how unfair it was. I kept believing that one day he would acknowledge my efforts, that he would appreciate everything I had done. I was wrong. As time passed and the business grew, Daniel's behavior only got worse. He started seeing himself as a successful businessman, even though he had done nothing to earn that title. He spent his days at the golf course with friends, traveled for networking events that looked more like luxury vacations. Meanwhile, I stayed at the company, solving problems, managing crises, making sure employees got paid. When we faced an economic downturn, I had to restructure the entire company budget to avoid bankruptcy. He didn't even notice. But the biggest betrayal came when he started openly claiming he was the mastermind behind our success. At dinner parties with friends, he would go on about his incredible business vision and how he knew exactly how to position the company in the market. I would sit there in silence, holding my wine glass, pretending none of it bothered me. Until one night, one of his friends joked, "Man, you really knew how to pick a wife. While you shine, she holds everything together behind the scenes." They laughed, but I didn't. That sentence kept ringing in my head. I wasn't just his support. I was the real force behind that empire. And deep down, Daniel knew it. He knew it so well that when he decided to file for divorce, he thought he could simply demand half of everything. After all, that's how he had always lived, reaping the rewards of my hard work. But this time, he was about to find out that I was no longer the woman who stayed silent in the face of injustice. I had known my marriage was over long before Daniel ever said the word divorce. The last few years had been nothing but a farce. He played the role of a devoted husband in public, but at home we were practically strangers. But despite the coldness between us, I still wasn't prepared for the day he would throw everything in my face as if I meant nothing. It was a Saturday morning when he finally said it. I was in the kitchen drinking my coffee when he sat across from me with that cold, calculating look I knew all too well. "I think it's about time we talk about this," he began, his voice slow and detached, as if it were just another casual conversation. "I want a divorce." I didn't react right away. I just stirred my coffee calmly, trying to process the words that, in truth, I had been expecting for a long time. "All right," I replied, emotionless. He raised his eyebrows, surprised by my lack of reaction. "All right? That's it?" "What do you want me to say, Daniel? Our marriage ended a long time ago. You finally had the guts to admit it." He seemed satisfied with my response. He thought he was in control of the situation. Then, with all the confidence in the world, he dropped the bombshell. "I've been talking to my lawyer. Let's do this the fair way. We split everything 50-50, no complications. You sell the company, and we divide the money." For the first time in a long time, my heart pounded with anger. I slowly set my cup down on the table and looked him straight in the eyes. "I'm sorry. Did I hear you right? You want me to sell the company that I practically built on my own?" He chuckled, as if I were naive for thinking otherwise. "Babe, you're being dramatic. The company is ours. Marriage is a partnership, remember? What's yours is mine too. And legally, I'm entitled to half." At that moment, I finally saw the real Daniel. Not the man I had once fallen in love with, but the opportunist who had always been by my side, feeding off everything I built. He didn't want a fair divorce. He wanted to walk away a winner, taking half of something that was never truly his. But there was something Daniel didn't know. Something that was about to make this divorce the biggest shock of his life. Over the next few days, Daniel carried himself like he had already won. He even started telling his friends how he was finally getting out of a failed marriage with a lot of money in his pocket. I just watched in silence. The following week, he invited me to a civilized dinner where he planned to discuss the details of the divorce settlement. He was convinced I had already agreed to sell the company and split the money. But just as he started talking about negotiating the terms, I pulled an envelope from my bag and slid it across the table. "What's this?" he asked, frowning. "Company documents. You should take a look before you keep talking." He picked up the papers and started reading. Watching his expression change was the most satisfying thing I had ever seen. This must be a mistake," he muttered, flipping through the pages quickly, as if searching for a hidden clause that would work in his favor. But there was no mistake. The company was never in my name, which meant he had no right to anything. Daniel's silence was deafening. He read and reread the documents as if somehow the words would change before his eyes. His fingers trembled as he turned each page, and sweat began to form on his forehead. His arrogance had completely evaporated. This doesn't make sense," he stammered, finally looking up at me. I crossed my arms and leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment. "Oh, it makes perfect sense, Daniel. You just thought you knew more than you actually did." He slammed the folder shut and stared at me, now visibly nervous. "What do you mean the company isn't in your name? You ran everything. You practically lived in that business." I gave him a small smile, feeling a satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. "Exactly. I ran everything. I did all the hard work. I turned the company into what it is today. But I was never stupid, Daniel. From day one, I knew I couldn't blindly trust you." He blinked a few times, struggling to process. "But then who owns the company?" I leaned forward and spoke slowly, making sure he felt every word. "My sister." The shock on his face was priceless. "What? That's ridiculous." "It's the truth. Years ago, when I realized you loved taking credit for my work and that you were drifting further away from me, I took precautions. Legally, the company belongs to my sister. I'm just the administrator. You can't touch a single cent of that money." Daniel took a deep breath and ran his hands over his face, desperately searching for a loophole, a way out. But on paper, you still have a stake in it, right? You have to split something with me." I shook my head, tasting victory. "No. When we started the company, you insisted we be partners, remember? But since you never got involved in the paperwork, you also never noticed that I transferred everything to my sister years ago. My name isn't listed as an owner. That means you have no right to anything." Daniel looked like a man sinking in quicksand. He grabbed the papers again, flipping through each page, his breath heavy with frustration. This is illegal! You tricked me!" "No, Daniel. You tricked yourself. You assumed I'd be dumb enough to leave everything in my name while you lived like a king, just waiting for the right moment to discard me and take half of what I built." He shut his eyes and took a deep breath, trying to regain control. But it was too late. He had already lost. Then, something changed in his expression. Anger. "You won't get away with this," he growled, pointing a finger at me. "I'm hiring the best lawyers. I'll destroy you." I let out a low laugh. "Go ahead. But remember, you'll be spending a fortune suing someone who, legally, owns nothing. Do you really want to walk away from this with debts?" He stared at me with pure hatred. For the first time in his life, Daniel realized he wasn't the smartest person in the room. He underestimated me, and now there was nothing he could do. Daniel's silence told me everything. He had no way out, no way to manipulate the situation in his favor, no way to take half of what I had built. For the first time in years, I saw desperation in his eyes. He slammed the folder shut and stared at me, trying to regain his arrogant composure. But his voice faltered when he spoke. You're going to regret this." I smiled, but not out of, happiness. It was the smile of someone who had finally been freed from years of injustice. You know what's funny, Daniel? I already regretted it. I regretted wasting 20 years of my life beside a man who never valued me, killing myself with work while you paraded around as a great businessman, turning a blind eye every time you cheated, humiliated me, and made me feel small. I stood up from the table and grabbed my purse. But today, for the first time, I don't regret a thing. I think that was the moment he realized there was no turning back, that this was the end of our story, and that this time, I was the one walking away on top. In the following days, Daniel fought back. He scheduled meetings with lawyers, made calls, desperately tried to find a legal loophole to get something. But he found nothing. The company wasn't in my name. My finances had been separate from his for years. I owed him nothing. The divorce was quick. He walked away with only a fraction of the money he thought he'd get, enough to start over, but nowhere near the luxurious life he had planned. And ironically, that's when everything began to fall apart for him. Without the company supporting his lifestyle, Daniel had to face a reality he had never known. Bills to pay, no status, the weight of no longer being the great businessman he had always bragged about. The friends he had been so eager to impress, they vanished. The younger woman he left me for, she didn't stick around for long. And me, I was reborn. After the divorce, my life finally began for real. I kept running the company, but this time, for myself, without carrying anyone on my back. And most importantly, without keeping quiet. I started traveling, meeting new people, enjoying the life that had always been mine, but that I had never allowed myself to live while I was with Daniel. One day, months after the separation, I received a message from him. It was short, direct. "Can we talk?" I looked at the message and felt nothing. Not hatred, not anger, not a desire for revenge, just indifference. And that's when I realized that was my greatest victory. I simply blocked his number and moved on. Because I finally understood that the best response to a man like Daniel was the silence of a woman who no longer needed him. Justice doesn't always come from courtrooms or carefully planned revenge. Sometimes it comes from simply living your life without carrying the weight of someone who never deserved you. Daniel thought he could destroy me, but in the end, all he did was set me free. And that was the best thing he ever did for me.